Foreign Concept in association with Re-Up London. Check out Re-Up London on Instagram for the latest merchandise. If you know, you know.
Do you know that we were circumnavigating the entire planet thousands and thousands of years ago? But only 500 years ago, Caucasian people thought the world was flat.
Teach.
You thought that if you sailed too far out into the sea, you'd fall off the edge.
The revolution will be televised. Foreign Concept, the unapologetically black podcast. There are many chapters of history that have been erased from the record books. The invasion of Spain by the Moors, who ruled and introduced a new way of living to the Europeans. Dr. Peter Imagawal, a Nigerian who many have dubbed to be the father of the internet, due to the software he created that went on to be the blueprint for the internet. On this episode of Foreign Concept, we focus on the Twa Pygmies of Central Africa and why their story has not been shared. This is the story of the Leprechaun, the lost history of the Twa people.
Who are you?
The question isn't who am I? The question is, where am I?
The Twa people are a tribe of pygmies, a fancy term used to describe short people. They are a group of hunter-gatherers who are said to be in tune with nature. The average height for a male is 4'11", and for females, it is significantly lower. It is argued that the reason why they are so short is the result of an adaptation of environment. It is important to note that the Twa people do not believe in violence. Historical research strongly suggests that the Twa Pygmies may have been the very first humans to live in Ireland. Roughly around 10,000 years ago, it is estimated that around 200,000 African Twa Pygmies migrated from Central Africa to what is now modern-day Ireland at various stages. They were among the first ancient civilization of Ireland, meaning they were there long before the Druids and the influence of the Roman Catholic Church. A gene study led by Daniel Bradley of Trinity College in Dublin traces the origin of the ancient Irish people to places such as Russia, Ukraine, and Spain, who, if you remembered, were ruled by the Moors. Those settlers at the time, the Twa people, possessed advanced knowledge of technology and medicine, which Caucasians at the time thought to be magical. There's a possibility that they could have been the ones that built or inspired the famous Drumbeck Circle.
Well, the stones were used to make alignments between the sun, the moon, and the stars, the polar axis. It helped them know where true north was, north and south, east and west, which they aligned to the equinox, the spring equinox. But it was their calendar. I mean, it showed them what time of the year they were.
As prior to the influence of the Roman Catholic Church, the Twa people's way of life went on to influence the likes of the Druids' religion.
And together they tell us about these very remarkable people who were a kind of religious caste, but they were also the intellectuals of Iron Age society. Within them resided all society's knowledge. So that when Julius Caesar came across the Druids, he was very impressed, and he listed what the Druids did, what their main tasks were. Most important, they interceded between man and the gods.
The practices of the Druids were seen as pagan behavior in the eyes of the Roman Catholic Church. This prompted them to make it their mission to convert the Jews, and if they couldn't do this, remove them and their belief system. This was also the case for the Twa people who were present in Ireland at the time. The church gave a court order known as the Inquisition. The purpose of this order was to convert the non-believers into Christians. The tactics used involved intimidation, which would then lead to slaughter. It was a do or die kind of situation. The man this order was given to was Maewyn Succat, also known as St.Patrick.
There are a lot of legends surrounding St. Patrick. Some say that he raised people from the dead. Others say that he drove snakes out of Ireland.
The 12 people who refused to change their belief system were systematically wiped out from the face of Ireland, and their property and land were then seized. Maewyn Succat went on to become a saint, and the story of St. Patrick's Day became a tale of how Maewyn saved the people of Ireland from snakes, when in reality, research shows there is no evidence that snakes have ever existed in Ireland. This is due to the climate being way too cold for them, and also there's only one type of reptile that is native to Ireland. Scholars have suggested the term snakes was used to refer to a pagan religious belief and practices that were different from what the Europeans believed at the time, rather than the snake itself.
Many think that snakes was a metaphor for the conversion of the pagans, meaning that he drove paganism out from Ireland.
The 12 people used to wear a uraeus, which was a particular hat showing a snake image. This type of image is also found on the heads of kings and queens of ancient Egypt. As prior to the influence of Western culture, snakes or serpents was an African symbol for eternal life, protection, and wisdom. The story of the 12 people is reflected in many of the Irish legends that have been passed on from one generation to the other. For instance, the magical creatures commonly referred to as the leprechaun is supposed to be a metaphor for the Twa Pygmies. The leprechauns are said to be short in height, magical and full of coin, which is exactly how the other settlers referred to the Twa people at the time. They were short, as the average height for a male was 4'11". They had knowledge of new concepts such as medicines, which the Europeans at the time had not come across, meaning that when the 12 people would help heal them, the Europeans thought that they were using magic. As the story got passed on from one generation to the other, the identity of the leprechaun changed. They became little green men instead of the little black men or Twa people, as they were originally known as. It's easier to believe the fairy tale of the leprechaun than it is to believe that the Twa people made a journey from Africa to Ireland 10,000 years ago. And do you know why? Because according to your history books and ignorance, Africans had no history prior to slaveries. Africans navigating the seas before the European does not meet the narrative. Saying that, if you're anything like me, throughout this whole episode you're thinking to yourself, this is an interesting story, but is it credible? Why is this story not known on a global scale? Simple. The same way we don't know about the Twa story is the same reason we don't know facts such as the first university in the world was in Mali, Timbuktu. Since the independence, Zimbabwe has one of the highest adult literacy rates in the world. Facts. These facts are not shared because they do not meet the narrative of the gatekeepers. That's the thing about history. People tend to change it to a narrative that will only benefit them. In relation to the Twa Pygmies, the credibility of the story comes from historians such as James Donoghue and scholars such as David McRitchie, who wrote in his book called Ancient and Modern Britons that the wild tribe of Ireland were black men. Likewise, in the Journal of the Royal Institution of Cornwall, page 280, the writer states that he believes that the first humans who entered Cornwall belonged to a race of dwarves or pygmies. Within that same page, he talks about when the Dutch occupied South Africa. They met with the dwarf Bushmen, who happened to be the smallest group of pygmies in the world. Furthermore, in The Riddles of the Prehistoric Times by James Anderson, published in 1911, it says that the little dark Welshmen, the Scot and the black Celts to the west of the River Shannon in Ireland, as well as the same kind of men in Britannia and in France, the Guanches of the Canary Island and the Berbers in Africa are all probably remnants of the race. If you look up the word remnants, it means part or quantity that is left after the greater part has been used, removed or destroyed. Draw your own conclusion to that, because I did. When I researched the Berbers of Africa and the Guanches of the Canary Island, I found that they were all from the black race. I believe these people travelled the world along with the likes of the Twa, but stopped at different locations. History is not a fairy tale. It is reality of the events of the past. It shouldn't be used to miseducate or misguide people. When history is told from a different narrative, people are quick to dismiss it as it goes against their whole belief system. Do your own research on the matter and come to your own conclusion. As for the Twa people, the branch that did not travel to Ireland are currently alive in various parts of the globe. For example, some are currently based in Southeast Asia, while some are in Central Africa, Rwanda, and many other rural African locations. However, the numbers are reducing due to conflict and the fact that their land is being stolen. They do not have no one to stand up for them. We must keep this historical tribe alive. Foreign Concept in association with Re-Up London. Check out Re-Up London on Instagram for the latest merchandise. If you know, you know. Foreign Concept, the unapologetically black podcast. The leprechauns are said to be short. The leprechauns are said to be short in height, magical, and full of gold coin. The Twa people used to wear a Bruv, how the fuck do I even say that word? Ureas. While some are currently based in Southeast Asia, while some are still in Central Africa, Rwanda, and